What's up, everybody? Welcome into the Next Pats podcast. I'm Phil Perry. Big time episode for you this week. We've got the NFL Network's Bucky Brooks of the Move the Sticks podcast. He and Daniel Jeremiah kill it all year long on all things NFL, but especially this time of year, these two former scouts have it locked down on the draft. What to look for, team needs, why certain things should work in the league while others might not. So phenomenal follow at Bucky Brooks on Twitter, and a great guest for us to have here on Next Pats. But before we get to that conversation, let's hit on a couple of different Patriots related items. Number one, as we're recording, we are about not even 24 hours removed from the Patriots officially making the call not to franchise tag JC Jackson. No surprise there. JC Jackson, as I had reported a couple of weeks ago, hadn't really had all that much contact with the Patriots, really no contact for a time since the end of last season. He was wondering what was up. Did they want him around? Did they not? Did they think he was important to their overall team build or not? He was willing to play on the franchise tag, $17.3 million, not a bad chunk of change for a guy who had made about $5 million through the first 4 years of his career. So he was willing to do that, he told me. But did he want to do that? No, of course not. No player really is dying to play on the franchise tag. He wanted to go somewhere where he was going to be paid for 4-5 years, be able to settle in, settle his family, and be set. That doesn't get accomplished when you're on the tag. So now JC Jackson, one step closer to that kind of deal. I spoke to him on Tuesday night, right before our episode of Early Edition with Trenny, right at 6:00. And I found it interesting that he didn't necessarily rule out the possibility of coming back to the Patriots. Now, the safe bet, in my opinion, is that he'll be playing elsewhere in 2022 and beyond. But the fact that he has not completely slammed the door shut, I think is at least noteworthy. He did enjoy his time here in New England. He enjoyed his time playing for Bill Belichick, especially this past year. I know he had a blast. So wasn't insulted by what the Patriots had offered him. They did make him a contract offer mid-season. Not an insulting offer, but just not one that was good enough for him to bite. And when he was that close to unrestricted free agency, he bet on himself. Now he's there, and now he's going to get paid. And in all likelihood, I think he's going to see something in the range of $18 million a year, if not more. So we'll see where his market ends up. He's working with veteran agent Neil Schwartz. Not a bad person to have representing you. If he's able to argue to teams, hey, because the cap is about to balloon, you need to pay my guy what will be the going market rate for a very good corner 2 and 3 years from now, that number could be closer to 20. Maybe it gets to 20. So it'll be really fascinating to see how that market shakes out. But I think they are still in the fact-finding portion of what Jackson's market will actually be when we actually get to free agency. There's no doubt they have a pretty good idea right now what that thing will look like. But Monday starts the legal tampering period. And if you get a couple teams involved, that's all you need sometimes for that number to start to climb. So we'll see how JC Jackson's market ends up shaking out and where he ends up next week. I'm sure we'll have some updates from him, from the man himself, very soon. So now the question is, if Jackson's not back, where do the Patriots turn next? And I think this is a good time for us to do a little bit of a review of the workouts at the Combine. Plenty of takeaways from the Combine itself. Hopefully you listened to our episodes from last week. We talked to Mike Renner from Pro Football Focus, Judy Batista from NFL Network on the players that would fit well with the Patriots. Judy talking about the rules and the competition committee conversations that are happening. We talked to Dane Brugler about some more updates on prospects that could interest the Patriots and positions of need for them, and John Mechie specifically, and how might he fit in with Mac Jones. We talked to Charlie Weiss and Nick Caserio about Bill Belichick and this Patriots coaching staff, especially on the offensive side. What might they do there? So we loaded you up with stuff from the Combine last week, but we really haven't hit on the workouts themselves yet because those things go through the weekend. And so this is our first pod recording this week at least. And so I just wanted to give you a quick stock up, stock down. First of all, by the way, for more on the Combine and everything I was hearing there, we won't go through it all here on the podcast. We will touch on a lot of these topics. We already have touched on some of them in previous pods. but we'll continue to touch on these, I'm sure. But if you're just looking for a run through of my notes from the combine and everything that I heard while I was there, speaking to people across the league, head on over to my Twitter page at Phil A. Perry. In my pinned tweet right now, it says Perry : things I heard about the Patriots during my week in Indy. You're going to get a whole list of notes there, so you can catch yourself up on that if you haven't seen it already. But as far as the workouts go, you want to do a little stock up, stock down? Of course you do. Of course you do. We've got you covered. Let's do some offensive players first, because I think it's not just me who's looking at the Patriots and their need to upgrade at the receiver position this offseason. It's people around the league. I know it's a lot of you as well. So offensively, whose stock is up at the weapons spots? Boundary receiver, X receiver, slot receiver, running back. Stock up for me has to be Christian Watson. North Dakota State, nice Senior Bowl, amazing combine. Arguably the best athlete at the combine across positions. 4.36 40 at 6'4", massive vertical, 38.5, massive broad jump, 11 feet 4 inches. His broad was the best of anybody, regardless of position, at this year's combine. Explosiveness personified. That guy's stock way up. Potential second round pick for the Patriots if they end up going corner in the first round. I like that fit there. Maybe he's the Kyle Duggar, the offensive version of Kyle Duggar of this year's draft. Smaller program, North Dakota State, not quite Lenore-Ryan, Division II Lenore-Ryan, but smaller program, excellent athlete, very good Senior Bowl. So you've proven you have the athleticism to compete with the big boys. You've actually competed with the big boys at the Senior Bowl. Some good college production. Feels like he could be a Patriot to me, especially those athletic testing numbers. The Patriots, when they draft receivers, they want real athletes. And I know that's going to make some people's heads explode based on the fact that they took N'Keal Harry. But go back and look at N'Keal Harry's combine. Really good for a player who weighed in at almost 230 pounds. 40 in the low 4.5s. Great vertical, great broad. Like, he was, for his size, he was an elite athlete. And so that's usually what they draft, whether it's, for good, for better or for worse, right? Chad Jackson, elite athlete. Deion Branch, elite athlete. These guys have amazing quickness, usually very good speed. Aaron Dobson was an excellent athlete, somebody who was long, but still very quick. So they do care. They do care about these testing numbers, and nobody tested better than Christian Watson, in my opinion. Stock way up. Stock up in terms of interior guys. Calvin Austin from Memphis. This guy we've mentioned on the pod before. We knew he was going to blow up the combine, and boy, did he ever. 4.3 240, 11.3 broad jump, 39-inch vertical, near the top of the top, and just about every category. And then the shuttle times. Not many people did the 3-cone or the short shuttle this year. 6.65 3-cone and a 4.07 short shuttle. For Patriot slot receivers, that's the type of electric quickness that they're typically drafting when they're drafting those interior guys. So again, Deion Branch, or look at Julian Edelman. I mean, these guys have ridiculous 3-cone and short shuttle numbers, and Calvin Austin's right there. He's also incredibly small, and he's smaller than any receiver weight-wise that the Patriots have drafted at 170 pounds. So is he going to be on their radar? I'm not sure, but man, the athleticism is off the charts. Stock up at running back. How about Isaiah Pacheco from Rutgers? So there's bullet point number 1 as to why we should be paying attention to that guy. He's played for Greg Schiano, Bill Belichick's good friend. Very, very, very briefly, the Patriots defensive coordinator, if you remember. He ran his 40 at 4.37 seconds at 216 pounds. So this guy's about Damian Harris's size. And he ran a 4.37. That is elite. That is mind-blowing. So a bigger back with that kind of home run speed, at least you could see him being used on special teams. And if not, potentially working his way into the lineup. Now, we know Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson are going to be the guys there, but later rounds, why not take a flyer on a guy who's that athletic and plays that position? Because we know those guys tend to get hurt. All right, stock down for some of these guys. Treylon Burks from Arkansas. I've put the next Pat's curse on Treylon Burks, I guess. He goes 4.55 in the 40. My understanding is played a little bit heavier than his listed 225 pounds last season. And so spent some time just trying to shed weight this offseason. And so maybe didn't do the same kind of training that some of these other guys are track and field wise. I also think there were some people who weren't that surprised at that 4.55 number because he is such a build up speed kind of player that, you know, he's probably really not hitting his stride. He's probably not as explosive as some others right out of his stance. And so he's not hitting his stride until he's a little further down the field. I still like Treylon Burks. This is a guy who many were projecting to go in the top 15 and be the first receiver overall off the board. If he's there at number 21 overall, I think you really do have to consider it because I think he's a good athlete. That production in the SEC is hard to fake. And to me, when you can get a big body who moves as well as he does and who can play the ball in the air the way that he does, to me, you've got a different situation on your hands than N'Keal Harry. And again, we talked about this a little bit on the Patriots Talk podcast earlier this week. I think with N'Keal Harry, I don't think he failed because of his athleticism. I think the reason he did not pan out the way that the Patriots anticipated was more intangible. And so if you feel better about how Burks is going to work on his craft behind the scenes, how he's going to take to being a pro, I don't think you should stay away from big, impressive athletes just because one big, impressive athlete let you down. Stock down slot position, Jahon Dotson. We're going to talk about Jahon Dotson with Bucky Brooks in just a minute here. But a 40 at 4.43 when he weighs in at 178 pounds, just a little disappointing. That's a fast 40. Don't get me wrong. But scouts were expecting him to run in the 4.3s. He doesn't. So his stock a little bit down for me. He's maybe more of a second round player than a first round player now. And stock down at the running back spot. Let's go Kyren Williams. It's another guy that I felt looked like a prototypical Patriot, because of the sure hands, over 40 catches last year, just one drop, but also because of the willingness and pass protection. This guy is an animal as a pass protector, arguably the best at this position in this year's draft class. And that matters for the Patriots. And so I'll still have him on their radar as we get closer to the draft. But after the combine, you have to say stock down. When you run a 4.65 40 at 194 pounds, 5'9", 194, it ain't good. Let's just put it that way. He was the slowest running back at this year's combine. So you have to say stock down. All right, we're going to go very quickly through the stock up, stock down for the defensive guys right now, because we're going to hit on some more defensive players, corner specifically. All right, let's start talking about this plan after J.C. Jackson with Bucky Brooks. But stock up, you got to go Kaiir Elam from Florida. Man, 4.39 in the 40. True press man corner on the outside. Physical guy, SEC experience. Sounds like a Patriot to me. And that 40-yard dash at 6'2", 191. Extremely, extremely impressive. A lot of impressive corners in this year's draft. Zion McCollum, 4.3, 340. 6'4", 3 cone, 3.94, sub 4 second short shuttle. That is elite. That's 6'2", almost 200 pounds. That's somebody who's going to get drafted, I think, much higher than people are anticipating, just because the athleticism is so damn good. Tariq Woolen, another player who I think people had firmly on day 3. Wouldn't surprise me now if we should be talking about him as a firmly on day 2 kind of guy. It's Tariq Woolen. UTSA, 4.26 40, one of the fastest 40s in combine history at 6'4", 205. So picture Jawan Williams essentially, but Jawan Williams being one of the fastest players in the league. 34-inch arms, perfect fit if Bill Belichick wants to continue to run this press man scheme on the outside. Again, we talked about that on the Patriots Talk podcast yesterday. If they lose J.C. Jackson, are they married to that scheme? Do they have to find players and be aggressive in terms of finding those press man guys and drop them into this defense? Or are they more malleable than that? I think they are. I think they could shift to being more of a zone team if they don't have the personnel to play man. But if they want to play man, Tariq Woolen seems like he'd be a fit for sure. Jordan Davis, defensive tackle, who runs a sub 4.8 40. I mean, 341 pounds, Bill Belichick often saying it about bigger bodies, right? Those guys don't grow on trees. Jordan Davis, certainly, I don't think he grew on planet Earth. I think he's an alien. So his stock is up after that tremendous, tremendous combine. Troy Anderson, the linebacker from Montana State. This guy played quarterback, played fullback, played linebacker, 4'4", 240 at 6'3", 243 pounds. You're getting into the range there. That's not quite Dante Hightower or Brandon Spikes or Gerard Mayo ended up being a 250-pound linebacker, but it's close. Mayo was in the 240s when he was drafted. So if they're looking at Troy Anderson and they're saying, man, this guy's an excellent athlete. He's got the frame where we might be able to put a little bit more weight on him. He's smart. He's a Campbell Trophy finalist. That's the academic Heisman. That thing's always popping up when we do our prototypical Patriots series. Consistently looking at Campbell Trophy guys. That's a name that could end up in New England. Darian Beavers from Cincinnati. We talked about him with Dane Brugler in last week's podcast. Leo Chanel, we talked about him with both Dane Brugler and Mike Renner in podcasts last week. Those guys lit it up in Indy as well. Beavers, interestingly, after weighing over 250 pounds at the Senior Bowl, checked in at 237. So he was ready to go, and he blazed a 6.91 second three cone time. So 6'4", 237 to go 6'9" at the three cone. Really, really impressive. Leo Chanel, one of the most impressive combines, period. I think it flew a little bit under the radar because so many guys ran so damn fast. But at 250, 6'3", 250, 40.5-inch vertical, 10.8 broad jump, 4'5", 340. I mean, at 250 pounds, so 25 pounds heavier than Treylon Burks, and he goes with a 40 faster time than Burks did. That's wild to me. Quay Walker, again, we knew he'd be fast. He was out of Georgia, 6'4", 241. He goes 4.52 in the 40. Excellent 40 time for him. On the edge, Traven Walker from Georgia, his stock is way up. I think there were some people who thought he might land in the Patriots range in the 20s somewhere in the first round. After his 4'5", 140, I don't see that happening at 275 pounds. He's going to go higher than that. Boye Mafe from Minnesota is a name that we should keep an eye on, though. 260-ish pounds. Great combine. 4'5", 3 second 40, 38-inch vertical. Really good athlete. His arms aren't the longest, but I think the Patriots would really appreciate his style of play. So that's a stock up for me in terms of a potential Patriot. Got to go with some stock downs now. These guys are still good players. Don't get me wrong. Kyler Gordon, cornerback from Washington, thought he would light it up in his workouts. That's one name that had been mentioned to me consistently by scouts as somebody who is really going to light things up in Indianapolis. 4'5", 240. That's not lighting it up. So stock down. I think you'll have to maybe wait to see what happens at his pro day if he decides to retest, see if we can get some different numbers from Kyler Gordon that kind of backs up the athleticism that you see on tape. Stock down at linebacker. I'm going to say Devin Lloyd. I like Devin Lloyd. As a player, and he ended up having a combine similar to Darius Leonard. Our guy, Daniel Jeremiah, ended up pointing that out on the broadcast if you're watching, but he clocks a 4'6", 640, 16th at the position at this year's combine at 237 pounds. I thought he'd be faster. I think scouts thought he'd be faster as well. So really good player. If he's there at 21, should the Patriots consider him? Sure. But maybe not quite the combine that we're anticipating. All right, so there you go. You got your stock up, you got your stock down, offensively, defensively, plenty of Patriots types at the combine. If you're looking for speed on either side of the ball, but I know people are looking to get faster on defense, this is the draft class for you. If you're looking for some speed on the outside in the slot for the Patriots offense, this is the draft class for you. So we've talked about it on this podcast before. Maybe not the top end, high end, elite first round talent where you can look at these guys and lock them in as first rounders the same way you might be able to in other years. Maybe there's 10 to 12 of those guys, maybe even less. But that range after that, so you're talking middle of the first round all the way through the second and into the third, I think there are starters there. Maybe not stars, but starters. And clearly plenty of guys who are athletic enough to help them not only get by at the NFL level, but really make an impact. So you want the Patriots to get some speed. They should be able to do exactly that in this year's draft. Let's talk more about the draft and what the Patriots can do if J.C. Jackson's not back. Bucky Brooks, still a big fan of J.C. Jackson. And again, J.C. Jackson didn't rule out a return. So how important is it to the Patriots to maybe try to woo him back in Bucky Brooks's eyes? And what do they do if they can't get him back? Who in this year's draft class looks like a fit for the Patriots secondary. Let's talk about that and much more right now with Bucky Brooks. All right, very happy to have with us now Bucky Brooks, NFL Network. Here on Next Pats, Bucky, we talk a lot about the draft. I'm definitely going to ask you about the draft. Yeah. But with your background, played this position, have to ask you about J.C. Jackson because he's making all kinds of news up in Boston, wants to get paid, whether it's on the franchise tag, long-term deal. What I want to ask you, though, is in terms of the Patriots and the defense that they like to play, should it be a necessity that they make sure that they keep him in-house?
He's a talented player. What he has been able to do coming into the league as an undrafted free agent, finding his way onto the field, and then becoming one of the premier playmakers in terms of taking the ball away is like the Hollywood story, right? You just don't see that happening. He has great length. He has great anticipation. He does a great job playing within the system. He can play man. He can play zone. He has great eyes and awareness. The thing about the Patriots, though, they've had a ton of success stories like this. For every J.C. Jackson, I can point to a Malcolm Butler. Like, this is what they do. They have a recipe and a formula for developing defensive backs. And because they're a team that traditionally plays so much man-to-man, typically what Belichick and the Patriots have done is they get these guys up and going. They necessarily play so much man-to-man, they run them to the ground, then they let somebody else pay them. And so the big thing will be how essential to their defensive puzzle is J.C. Jackson. And do they have someone else in the pipeline that can step in like he stepped in when they lost other people?
And that might be the issue because I'm not sure they have anybody in the pipeline right now. But we've got the draft. And so maybe there's a guy, they're picking a 21 overall, that they feel like could step in and maybe not give you what J.C. Jackson's given you, most picks in the league since 2018, but at least give you representative effort, somebody who can mirror, with some really physically talented receivers that they'll have to face. So I love your top fives that you do for every position on NFL.com. And I know at corner, there was one name that stood out to me, and it's Andrew Booth of Clemson.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know why you like him so much, because it feels like Sauce Gardner for most people is right there at the top. He is for you, yeah. I know. And then you hear Stingley usually is somewhere in that 1 or 2 range, but you have Booth ahead of everybody else but Sauce. So why do you like him so much?
Because he's versatile. And I think for the Patriots, he is the right fit because I think versatility is such a big part of what the Patriots do on defense. We heard for 2 decades the Patriots have defensive game plans that are like snowflakes. 1 week they're heavy man, the next week they play all zone. 1 week they're blitzing, the next week they're falling off 8 in coverage. And so when I look at Booth, Booth gives you the best of each of those worlds because he can lock up, he can walk up and play man-to-man, nose-to-nose, he can bump and run. He can play off, and he has great instincts and awareness, route recognition skills. He has terrific ball skills. He can tackle on the edge, which is essential to when you're playing zone coverage because now you want to make sure that you can get guys down after they make receptions. And so I just see all of the instincts. I see the awareness. I see the intelligence. And to me, he's a guy that you can put right on the field in day one and feel real good about the player that you're getting.
Versatility, the ability to tackle. He does definitely sound like a Patriot. I want to stay on that side of the ball because there's another spot and another player that I'm like looking myself in the mirror saying, why have I not been talking more about this player? It's Christian Harris. He's a linebacker from Alabama. Mm-hmm. Bucky, those guys should be at the top of the list. Anytime we're talking about potential Patriots, we should start at that position at that school. But we haven't talked all that much about him. Why is he ranked so highly for you?
I don't know why we haven't talked about him. Like, look, the year is up and down in terms of, like, Alabama and the production of their defense. But as you alluded to, there's a blueprint. We have seen the little path where people go from Alabama right up to New England. They play in a defense that is not necessarily the same, but it's comparable to tennis. You've been coached the right way because Nick Saban and Bill Belichick believe in a lot of the same things when it comes to core beliefs and a philosophical approach to defense. This guy has all those things. He's a traffic cop, meaning he's a great communicator. He has high IQ. He understands how to play in a defense that is multiple. We talk about being able to play in a defense that may have some AFC tendencies, meaning automatic front and coverage, meaning that the defense changes based on what the offense comes out in. And so you have to have a high level of intelligence to be able to communicate that, get it to your people, and play it correctly. And so when I think about the Patriots, you have to have those kind of guys in the middle of the defense. And for the Patriots, the reason why he would be beneficial, they have to be more athletic in there. as much as I love Dante Hightower and those guys, the thumpers, you still need more athleticism. Sometimes in these games when they're playing against the prolific offenses, the lack of athleticism shows up. You have to be a little more dynamic on the back end if they can suffocate these teams.
Getting more athletic feels like a priority on both sides. So whether it's in the secondary, at the linebacker level, receiver is another spot that we've been talking a lot about. And one name that's in your top 5 that is maybe the best athlete in the class is Jahon Dotson. And I know you watch so many of these young players as they're coming up through the high school ranks and they're getting into college and you're following them all. How athletic is he? Is there a comp that comes to mind for you when you think of Jahon Dotson? And could you see him fitting in New England?
Oh, he absolutely can fit in. He can fit in because he is a guy that is an outstanding route runner. I think that's essential to being able to play in New England. When you look at the guys who have had the most success, they're the guys that were very polished, disciplined, and detailed in terms of their ability to run routes. The other thing that is essential in New England is you have to be able to make things happen when you get the ball in your hands. So when we go back and we think about Edelman, we think about Wes Welker and all those guys, they have the ability to do stuff when they get the ball. For Dotson, he has all of that. And I just believe when you're looking at this team and you're trying to figure out how can we build this offense out around Mac Jones, the best way to do it is not so much let's stretch the field vertically, how can we stretch it horizontally, meaning how can we hit these guys on the move under 10 yards, let Mac Jones get it out, and let these guys do all the heavy lifting for him. Jahon Dotson is a guy that can do all that.
So in that sense would fit what you have in terms of skill set at the quarterback spot.
Yes.
You don't need that cannon arm to be able to push it 60 yards down the field. You can get a 40-yard gain on a 10-yard throw.
And I think when we've seen them be at their best is because Mac Jones has been able to just connect the dots. Ball, he snaps it, gets it out of his hands, they move it, they stay ahead of the chains. And to me, like going all the way back, Tom Brady, that's what Brady did for the majority of the time. When they went to that spread and shred, they would go empty and he would kind of dink and dunk and kind of pinball it around. Those guys would break tackles, and those 5-yard passes would turn to 10 and 15-yard gains. That is the essence of how the Patriots have played offensively forever.
We've been talking a lot about these SEC receivers, but I think Penn State's Jahon Dotson is a name that we should be keeping in mind as well. Bucky Brooks, thanks so much for your insight. This was great.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
Awesome stuff there from Bucky. Really appreciate him spending some time with us in Indy. Everybody is running around like a chicken with their head cut off at that thing last week at the Combine. So we really appreciate Bucky for being with us. Some great insight there. Andrew Booth, really interesting name at that cornerback spot. We heard that name from Mike Renner as well, somebody who played a lot of off coverage as a collegian. And if the Patriots want to drop him into this press man scheme, how would it work? It looks like he has the traits to do exactly that. Andrew Booth from Clemson, really interesting name for Bucky to bring up and for him to have as highly ranked as he does in a cornerback class that has some real talent. Can he be the kind of player that the Patriots drop into this, whether it's a man-to-man scheme or something a little bit different, and have him contribute as not a Pro Bowler, not an all-pro right away, but somebody you could trust going up against, say, Stephon Diggs twice a year? It's a lot to ask, but it sounds like he has those kinds of physical traits to be able to mold himself into that kind of player. We heard about Booth last week from Mike Renner as somebody who has the traits to play that press man style. If the Patriots want to stick with it, to play that style, even though he didn't really do it at Clemson. They had him playing a lot of off coverage. So some projection there for the Patriots front office to have to do to be able to say, okay, hey, he's got the arm length, he's got the size, he's got the physical, aggressive demeanor, he likes to tackle. Athletically, he's there as well. It's just, can we picture in our mind's eye this guy playing more man-to-man than he had to at the college level? It's all part of the process. This offseason, what makes this stuff fun, trying to figure out how these guys can fit and can they do more than what they showed at the college level. That's what it's all about. So great stuff there from Bucky. Hopefully you guys learned something. I know I did. And hopefully you'll be able to learn something in our next Pats podcast. We'll be coming at you with a fresh one next week. So keep an eye out for that. We'll talk to you then.